I wish I had a different kind of story to share today. But once again, Houston, Texas has given us another heartbreaking and deeply disturbing case, one that shakes us to the core. This isn't just another crime story, it's a reminder of the evil that can lurk in the most unexpected places. There are stories that stick with you, stories that haunt you, stories that leave a scar. This is one of them. A little girl, 8 months old, just beginning to take in the world, to smile, to reach out with tiny hands, to babble her first sounds. She had no idea that the person she trusted most, the man who should have been her protector, was the one who would betray her in the worst way imaginable. And the worst part? No one stopped it. Not the system. Not the people who should have seen the signs. Not the ones who could have stepped in before it was too late. What happened to Savayah Mason was not just a crime. It was a failure. A failure that left an innocent child alone in her final moments, terrified, unable to cry for help, unable to understand why the hands meant to hold her with love were the ones that took her life. If you think child abuse is rare, think again. If you believe the system is designed to protect, this case will make you question everything. Because when those in charge of saving a child look the other way, the consequences are irreversible. And if you choose to continue, understand this. This is not just a story. It's a warning, a call to pay attention, a reminder of what happens when cries for help go unheard. This is the story of Savayah Mason, an innocent baby girl whose life ended before it even began, and the man who took everything from her. But before we begin, I want to thank you, my amazing viewers and subscribers, for your support through your likes, shares, and comments. Your engagements help make these stories more meaningful. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Now let's get started, shall we?
Father facing a judge accused of killing his baby girl while sexually assaulting her.
You ever hear people talk about Houston like it's the land of opportunity, the place where dreams come true? They're not wrong. Houston is a city on the rise. Big businesses, booming industries, neighborhoods that stretch for miles. It's got that southern charm mixed with big city ambition, a place where cultures blend, where success stories are made, where life moves fast and opportunities are endless. But let's be real. There's another side to this city, a side most people would rather ignore, the part that doesn't make it into the travel brochures or the real estate ads, the part where crime runs rampant, where violence is a daily reality, where the justice system isn't just overwhelmed, it's drowning. Houston isn't just growing in wealth, it's growing in danger. In 2022 alone, over 400 homicides were recorded, making it one of the most violent cities in America. Every single day, someone in Houston doesn't make it home. Some are killed in the streets, some behind closed doors, some at the hands of the very people who were supposed to protect them. And the worst part, the children. In Texas, child abuse is more than just a crisis. It's a full-blown epidemic. 182 children died from abuse and neglect in 2022 alone. That's nearly 4 children every single week. Babies, toddlers, kids who never got the chance to grow up. Some were beaten, some starved, some were left alone, unnoticed, until it was too late. And yet, no matter how many times the news reports on another child's death, no matter how many times a parent or guardian is arrested, it keeps happening. Why? Because the system that's supposed to protect children only works after they're already gone. Think about it. How many cases like this do we hear about? The reports always say the same thing. There were signs. There were warnings. Someone could have done something. But by the time anyone acts, the damage is done. And now, we come to this case. A case that should have never happened. A case that should have been stopped before it even began. Because Savayah Mason never should have been in the hands of Luis Luna. And yet, she was. And because of that, an innocent, helpless little girl lost her life in the worst way imaginable. This is not just another statistic. This is not just another crime report. This is a story of a system that failed, a little girl who was betrayed, and a monster who never should have been trusted. And it's time we talk about how this happened, because if we don't, it will happen again, and another child will pay the price. August 24th, 2020, a night that should have never happened because. At 12:20 a.m., a 911 call shattered the silence. A baby, unresponsive. The address? 15,000 block of West Park Drive, a rundown apartment complex in a part of town where no one asks too many questions, where people mind their business, even when something doesn't feel right. By the time paramedics arrived, Luis Luna was already outside, 23 years old, young, disheveled, panicked, or at least pretending to be. He told them he had just woken up and found his baby, 8-month-old Savayah Mason, unresponsive. He said he tried CPR, but nothing worked. The paramedics didn't waste time. They scooped up that tiny, lifeless body and rushed her to the hospital. But before the doctors could even try to save her, before anyone had time to hope for a miracle, it was already over. She was pronounced dead on arrival, a baby, gone, just like that. But here's the thing about crimes like this. They don't just happen out of nowhere. And within minutes, the red flags started showing. As officers questioned him, Luna stuck to his story. He said he had put his daughter to sleep in her car seat, right next to his air mattress, because apparently that was the best he could do. He claimed he may have fastened the straps too tight. Maybe that's why she couldn't breathe. Maybe it was just a tragic accident. He even threw in the part about trying CPR, because of course, he wanted to sound like a concerned father. But there was something off, something in his tone. He wasn't crying. He wasn't hysterical. He wasn't reacting like a man who had just lost his child. And when investigators stepped inside that apartment, what they found made their stomachs turn. A filthy mattress on the floor, barely any furniture. The kind of place that reeked of neglect, of desperation, of a life completely unraveling. It took less than 24 hours for the medical examiner's report to turn this case from a tragedy into a nightmare. Because Savayah Mason didn't die from tight car seat straps. She didn't die from a tragic accident. She was murdered. The cause of death? Asphyxiation. But not the kind that happens from an innocent mistake. No, this was different. The kind of suffocation that happens when someone is forcing you to stop breathing. And that wasn't all. There was blunt force trauma. Signs that she had been hit, shaken, brutalized. There was evidence that she had been bound. And worst of all, this tiny, helpless baby girl had been sexually assaulted by her own father. Pause for a second. Think about that. An 8-month-old baby, defenseless, unable to speak, unable to understand why this was happening to her. She had no way to fight back, no way to cry for help. And the very person who should have been protecting her was the one who stole everything from her. By the time the autopsy results were in, there was no doubt. This was murder. But the medical report was just the beginning. Investigators needed physical proof, evidence that would hold up in court, something that would make it impossible for Luis Luna to talk his way out of what he had done. And so, on August 25th, just one day after Savayah was pronounced dead, police executed a search warrant at Luna's apartment. They didn't have to dig too deep. The crime was right there, hiding in plain sight. First, they checked the sunroom, the cramped, barely livable space where Luis Luna had been sleeping. And there, buried inside a garbage bag, they found something that made their blood run cold. Bloody baby wipes. Not just one, not just a few, but an entire handful, soaked in evidence of the violence this baby had endured. And then, The diaper bag. It should have been filled with supplies, diapers, wipes, baby essentials. But there was nothing. Not a single diaper. Not a single thing to suggest that anyone in that apartment had planned to take care of an 8-month-old baby. But that wasn't the most disturbing part, because as they looked closer, they noticed signs of a struggle. A baby doesn't struggle unless she's trying to get away. And at that moment, every officer in that room knew this wasn't just a crime scene, this was a nightmare. The moment police brought Luis Luna in for questioning, he did what every guilty person does. He stuck to his story. That same ridiculous excuse he gave at the hospital. The car seat straps were too tight. He said he never hurt his daughter. He said he just woke up and found her like that. But what Luna didn't understand, what so many criminals fail to grasp, is that forensic evidence doesn't lie. And the moment investigators laid it all out in front of him, the bloodied baby wipes, the autopsy results, the blunt force trauma, he shut down. No more excuses, no more fake concern, just silence, because he knew there was no way out. Then the officer leaned forward, looked Luis Luna dead in the eye, and told him what everyone in that room already knew. You murdered your own daughter. And just like that, Luis Luna was arrested. The charge? Capital murder. In Texas, that means 2 possibilities: life in prison or the death penalty. And as they led him out of that room, as they locked those cuffs around his wrists, there was one thing that was absolutely certain. This man would never be free again. But the question remained, where is the mother? Janice Mason. If you ask people who knew her, they'd say she was a young mother trying to do her best. A woman who had once been in a relationship with Luis Luna, but had since separated, moving on with her life, trying to raise her baby the best way she knew how. She had custody of Savayah Mason, her little girl, her only child. But on August 21, 2020, it was supposed to be a routine visit. A chance for Luis Luna to see his daughter. A few days, that's all. Janice dropped Savayah off at Luna's apartment, likely believing she was doing the right thing, allowing a father to spend time with his child. But what happened next changed everything. She didn't pick her up that night. She didn't pick her up the next day. 3 days. 3 days where a helpless, defenseless baby girl was trapped in an apartment with a man who had no business caring for a child. But the red flags were there, and that's primarily about the apartment itself. This wasn't a home. This wasn't a place where a baby belonged. This was a cramped, overcrowded mess, a tiny space stuffed with 4 grown men, including Luna. No crib and no baby supplies. No sign that anyone in that apartment had ever been prepared to care for a child. And yet, Janice Mason left her baby there. Now, let's be clear. This is not about blaming a grieving mother, but it is about responsibility. Because at some point, we have to ask the hard questions. Did she know that Luna was unstable? That he was jobless, directionless, living in conditions unfit for a child? Did she ever step inside that apartment before leaving her daughter? Did she look around? Did she see where her baby would be sleeping, eating, living, even for just a few days? Because here's the truth, this wasn't a safe environment for a child, and someone should have seen that before it was too late. The moment this story broke, people had questions. And not just about Luis Luna. People wanted to know, how did this happen? How did a mother, the person meant to protect her child above all else, not see the danger? Some said she was just a young mom trying to do the right thing, that she had no way of knowing what Luna was capable of. Others weren't so forgiving. They argued that this was neglect, that any mother should check where she's leaving her child, that no one should have looked at that apartment, at that living situation, and thought, this is fine. And then there's the harshest reality of all. Would Savayah Mason still be alive if she had never been left there? Would she have lived if just one person had asked more questions? Would she have survived if someone had said, "This isn't right," before it was too late? Because 3 days was all it took, 72 hours. One decision. And an innocent child lost her life. By the time October 2024 arrived, the world had already judged Luis Luna. The evidence was overwhelming. The crime was unspeakable. There was no defense strong enough to erase what he had done. But inside the courtroom, it wasn't public outrage that mattered. It was the law. And now, a jury of 12 would decide the fate of the man accused of doing the unthinkable, brutally ending the life of his own 8-month-old daughter. For 10 days, the courtroom listened, and what they heard would haunt them forever. From the very first moment, prosecutors didn't hold back. They laid out the facts, the ones no one could argue with. Autopsy results? They confirmed suffocation. Not from a car seat, not from an accident, but during a violent, unimaginable act of abuse. Forensic evidence? The bloodied wipes, the missing diaper, the struggle marks, the horrifying proof of what this child had endured in her final moments. And then there were the witnesses, people who had seen Luis Luna unravel long before this crime happened, people who testified that he was unstable, dangerous, unpredictable, people who swore that this tragedy didn't come out of nowhere. Luis Luna sat in that courtroom expressionless, and when it was time for his defense, his lawyers had little to work with. So they did what they could. First, they pushed the accident narrative. Luna insisted he never meant to hurt his daughter. He swore he loved her. He repeated the same lie he had clung to from the beginning, that the car seat straps must have been too tight, that he had tried to help, that it was all just a tragic mistake. But the jury had already seen the evidence. They had already heard the medical examiner's findings. And they knew this wasn't an accident. So the defense tried something else. They played the mental health card. They pointed out that Luna had been in the mental health unit at the time of his arrest. They argued that he wasn't stable enough to stand trial, that he didn't fully understand what was happening, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't responsible for his actions. But here's the problem with that. The moment you look at the details of what he did, you realize this wasn't the act of an unconscious mind. It was calculated. It was deliberate. It was something no sane person, no parent, no human being should have ever been capable of. And no mental health plea could change that. So, on the 10th day of the trial, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. They didn't take long, because this wasn't a complicated case. This wasn't one of those trials where there was room for doubt. Everyone in that room, everyone who had heard the details of what happened to that baby girl, already knew the truth. And within a matter of hours, they came back with their decision. Guilty of capital offense, unaliving a child. Guilty of taking an innocent life in the most brutal, unforgivable way imaginable. And then, the judge made it official. Luis Luna, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No chance at freedom, no second chances, just a lifetime behind bars, with nothing but time to think about the little girl he destroyed. The trial was over. Luis Luna was locked away, sentenced to life without parole. But for the people watching this case unfold, for the community, for child advocates, for complete strangers who heard about this tragedy, the rage didn't stop when the verdict came down. If anything, it only grew, because justice felt incomplete. Yes, Luna was punished, but the damage was already done. A baby was still gone. A child who should have had her whole life ahead of her never even got to celebrate her first birthday. And the question everyone kept asking, how do we make sure this never happens again? But people wanted change, real change. There were protests, petitions, People demanding Texas crack down harder on child abusers because, believe it or not, Luis Luna escaped the worst possible punishment. In Texas, there's something called super aggravated child abuse laws. Under this law, someone convicted of the most extreme cases of child abuse, cases just like this one, can be sentenced to death. And yet, Luna wasn't. Some people were furious. They argued that if anyone deserved the death penalty, it was him. That there should be no second chances for people who do this to a child. That locking him away for life wasn't enough. Because what kind of justice system allows a man like Luna to keep breathing after what he did? But others saw it differently. Some believed death was too easy, that he deserved to rot in a cell for the rest of his days, forced to live with what he had done. And then, there was an entirely different debate, a debate that had nothing to do with Luis Luna, and everything to do with the mother who left her child with him. Should Janice Mason have faced charges? This was the controversy that refused to die. Because no matter how much sympathy people had for Janice Mason, there was a question that kept coming up. Should she have been held responsible too? Some people said absolutely. They pointed out that she left her daughter with a man who had no job, no stable home, no crib for his child. She didn't check on her baby for 3 days. She should have known better. And in cases like this, ignorance isn't an excuse, but others fought back against that idea. They said she was a grieving mother, not a criminal, that she trusted Luna, that she had no way of knowing what he was capable of, that blaming her was cruel, and that all the focus should stay on the real monster, the one who actually committed the crime. But here's the truth. Every decision matters. Every choice, no matter how small, can mean the difference between life and death. And unfortunately, the choices in this case led to an irreversible tragedy. And just when you thought the debates were over, another firestorm erupted, the GoFundMe. Shortly after Savayah's death, Janice Mason started an online fundraiser for funeral costs. She set a goal, $8,000. And in a matter of days, she raised $8,360. People donated out of kindness, out of sympathy, but not everyone was willing to just hand over their money without asking questions. Because some people wanted to know, why wasn't there life insurance for Savayah? Because here's the hard truth. Life insurance for a baby costs as little as $3 a month. $3. Less than a cup of coffee. And if $3 a month could have saved her from needing a GoFundMe, then why wasn't it done? Some people were furious. They felt like the GoFundMe was a way to profit off of a tragedy that could have been prevented. That instead of taking responsibility, it was easier to ask for donations. But others defended her. They argued that no parent expects to bury their child, that no one thinks about life insurance for a baby, that this wasn't about money. It was about a mother who lost everything. And at the end of the day, no amount of money was ever going to bring Savayah back. We've seen this happen before, too many times. A child is placed in danger, the warning signs are there, and yet nothing is done until it's too late. So, let's ask the hard questions. How did Luis Luna, an unemployed, unstable man with no proper home, end up with unsupervised access to an 8-month-old baby? Who made that decision? Who allowed it to happen? And why was a defenseless child left in an environment so obviously unfit for her? Because let's be clear, this wasn't some tragic accident. This was avoidable. And yet, just like so many cases before it, no one intervened when it actually mattered. This part of the conversation is difficult because it's not about pointing fingers. It's about accountability. And it's about prevention. Should there be stricter checks before parents can leave their children with an ex-partner? Because here's the truth, not every biological parent is fit to be around their child. Just because someone is a father or a mother doesn't mean they are safe. We see it in cases like this. A mother, trying to be fair, trying to give a father a chance, leaves her child in his care. And that decision costs the child their life. So should we start requiring background checks? Should family courts step in more aggressively when there are clear signs that a parent is unstable? And the hardest question of all, should parents be held legally responsible when they leave their child in a dangerous situation? Some say yes, that the law should not excuse carelessness, that if a parent knowingly places their child in harm's way, they should be held accountable. Others say no, that grief is punishment enough, that we should focus on the abuser, not the people who trusted them. But here's the thing, trust isn't enough, not when a child's life is on the line. And if we don't start taking these decisions seriously, more children will suffer the same fate. And that concludes Savayah Mason's story, a heartbreaking reminder that not all children are safe, even in the hands of those meant to protect them. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think more could have been done to prevent this tragedy? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If this story left an impact on you, there are more cases on this channel that expose the failures that cost innocent lives, stories that deserve to be remembered. So be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video to keep Savayah's story, and others like it, from being forgotten. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.